It's time to put the feet up, sit back and relax as we are about to dive into what has been an absolutely stunning last couple of days, a last weekend of amazing rugby action. Welcome along everyone to Cornflakes Crib, of course, and the series that seems to need an actual name. So I'll hopefully try to think of a name before I put this one out. If you have any name suggestions of your own, do let me know in the comments as well. But this is where we look over what has happened in the last couple of days. Some big matches, some big results as well, and we're going to have a look at the nitty gritty and what has happened and what could possibly reactions could have in the future as well. So before we dive straight into the two big key matches that I reviewed a couple of days ago, I want to have a bit of a look over some other goings on that happened in the weekend as well. A couple of extra games that may have happened that a lot of people may or may not have known that have happened. Probably the biggest one would have been the first match of the Pacific Nations Cup, was Fiji up against Tonga. Now this was really what Island Rugby is all about, this game. It ended up the Fijians winning 30 points to 22, but it was a really topsy-turvy match. Tonga had the early going on, and then the Fijians stormed back as they always do. There were some big names in there from Northern Hemisphere sides as well, as you'd expect. The Fijians, a good team. Tonga haven't beaten them in quite some time as well, but in the end it was the Fijians who stormed home from behind as well in a late flurry to steal the match right at the depth. Well, that was a super start to our rugby weekend as well. That one was on Saturday afternoon, my time in New Zealand here. Also, later on in that day, before we had our second rugby championship match, there was a game between the New Zealand Māori and the New Zealand Barbarians side. Now, this game was a bit of an All Black B team trial kind of thing. A lot of players that were on the fringe of All Black selection in both the Māori side and the Barbarians, and a chance to shine. There was a lot of All Blacks that were released that will not be used against Argentina or to go to South Africa, released for this match. Notably, players like Carballo, Corey Jane, another one who got another injury. So Jane is gone again. He's out with another setback. How long is he going to be out for? Who knows? Not really too sure just yet. But that match was quite a good game. Although in Eden Park it was absolutely pouring down, they did give themselves up to a 34-17 win to the Barbarians. The Māori going in their first loss for about 19 games. Yes, that stretched back to 2003. What an amazing record, stunned by their own countrymen of sort. What a game it was. It did really open up even in the rain after half-time, and it was a great match. A lot of fringe players got some real good time. The Barbarian side was led around by a fantastic effort from their forwards, and that really set the tone for them. The Māori couldn't get into the game. They had a little late flurry, but in the end the Barbarians stood tall enough to get the win. Comprehensively it seemed, but a lot closer than that scoreline possibly suggested. But there was a couple of games that happened over the weekend that you may not have known about on the international scene. Great opening periods before the Australian-South Africa match to watch those two games as well. But we will go back to Friday night where it all began, the first game of the Rugby Championship. It was New Zealand up against Argentina, the All Blacks and the Pumas, and there was quite a few talking points that I was really looking forward to in this one. Mostly, they cycled around the things we didn't know much about, like Naholo getting his first start, the centre pairing of Sonny Bill Williams and Ma'anonu, another thing that was going to interest me quite severely, the form of Dag and Piatau, who were treading on thin ice a bit at that stage before the match, and of course the big forward battle, which was going to be overall in the grand scheme of things the big thing that was going to interest me, whether the All Blacks could muscle it up to, let's be quite fair, a superior Argentinian forward pack who have based their game around how that forward pack plays. So the game had a lot riding on it. Not just for points, not just for the depth of the teams, but there was a lot of talking points going into this game. It started out early on that the All Blacks and Argentina switched roles a bit, with the All Blacks getting the early incentive with the scrums and the forward play, and the Argentinians were looking a lot more expansive in their backline play as well, which surprised me first off the whistle the most. The Argentinians were getting some real backline moves going. They were opening up spaces, and not really what I expected from them. They were getting quite expansive. The All Blacks were playing quite within themselves, and the Argentinians getting the ball through the back line. The All Blacks were dominating the first couple of scrums as well, which really did surprise me quite a lot at that stage, but it was a reversal. Early on, Argentina dominating the backs, which that really did surprise me. It did eventually settle down though. Argentina went back to playing possibly a bit more how they would have liked, but they did keep quite expansive. The first try come through Richie McCaw, and I felt at that stage that Daniel Carter was really starting to control the game, as we know he does so well as well, but he really is building his form quite nicely up from the end of Super Rugby, and he's coming beautifully into this form heading into this Rugby Championship tournament. McCaw got the opening try off of a line-out drive as well, a bit of a down the short side, down the blind side play, and it was a good try. Off we go. The All Blacks have their first one. Later on to the match, Israel Dag. This is a point that I was quite concerned about. Still keep playing him, still keep trying him. Is he ever going to rediscover his form of old? I was quite harsh on him, saying he shouldn't be in the squad, let alone the starting team. Well, he was good against Argentina. He pulled up his socks, he made some breaks, he was very good under the high ball. He was hard to get anything from a kick against, and he distributed later on in the match very well. For a start, he did keep very much to himself, but then he started to pass, and the All Blacks started to get their backline moves flowing all the way to the touchline. Dag was very instrumental in that as well, and as always, he is always very good under the high ball, but his defensive work, all that sort of stuff, I thought he was good. He's got back, not to that level he was, say, 4 years ago, but he was back to that, what you'd expect a performance from an All Black. So, I'm happy to say that Israel Dag is back. Call out what I said earlier. He's performed, and if he can keep that up and build on that, then we could see some good things from Israel Dag. Other players to stand out in that first half, or the first portion of the match, I thought Tukulet was playing very well for Argentina. Kubeli was doing quite well in the first half. He fell off the pace later on in the match, but Pity was quite good, playing in his first Rugby Championship game as well in the forwards. He looks a good player as well. Iguja out on the wing, a few chances for him. Took a couple of players always to bring him down. And while we're talking about wingers playing quite well, Charles Piutau, another one who I thought had to perform. He did. He stood up, eventually got himself a try as well, which is a massive thing for Charles Piutau, but he was looking a lot better. I think it's the fact of being in the All Black environment is starting to take effect now. We've seen it comparatively to against Samoa. They were pretty average, but they were very good. A lot more All Black looking than we've seen from him in the past. Kuriza, of course, the Stormers lock. What an outstanding player he was. He had the first half of dreams. He was huge on defence, putting in some massive, massive shots. And again, the captain, Creevy, fantastic captain, fantastic player. He went on to grab a couple of tries later on as well. But him and Kuriza, those two were massive in the forwards. Defensively, they were very good at shutting down the big All Black forwards, and they were really the highlights in that first half. A lot of good performances from Argentina. Their defence definitely kept them in the match as they headed towards the halftime break, where it was about 11-6, I think, at the break. Before the break, before all hell broke loose, but we'll get to that in just a second. Naholo took a while to get warming into that match. He's another talking point I wanted to bring up. He was very slow into the match. He got a couple of early touches, which didn't really go his way. He got brought down pretty quickly. He fumbled a bit, but that's to be expected. I mean, come on, All Black Test match debut. That's okay, I'm good with that, but he did build out of it. He came out of it nicely, and he's made some beautiful cutting runs through the middle of the Argentinian defence. His speed, his power was really starting to come along in that match, and I thought, wow, this guy's got it. He's got the goods to be an All Black, but that, of course, if you've been keeping tabs on the news, of course, that is dreams dashed, because Naholo was out. a fibia injury or something like that. He is gone for the World Cup, out of here. So Putnaholo out of your World Cup dream teams because he's gone. He is no longer in with a chance. But I thought he played very well in his debut match for the All Blacks. There was a lot of penalty chances for Argentina in that first half. Sanchez, probably the weak point in their backline, especially in that first half. He didn't really control the match too well. He just shuffled the ball along. His kicking was a bit off the mark. Argentina tried to force through points with the kicks. They only got a couple in the end. But near the end of that first half, it was really starting to come clear that the All Blacks were the better side, 1 through to 15 on form in that match. They were dominating most of the matchups heading on towards that break. And then, of course, what could possibly be described as the killer play that killed off Argentina right at halftime. It would have cut extremely deep into their confidence as well. Ma'anonu just barnstorms his way over, just absolutely blows everyone out of the way. A massive try, huge try. Not only a great try to watch, but the consequences of that try were just massive. It was a huge try in the overall context of the game. It was a good first half from Argentina. I thought, they come here. A lot of people always write the Argentinians off, but I thought they played well enough. They were good enough, and the defence, well, for one thing, before that try from Nonu, if they could have held out that try by Nonu, then it would have been a very close half-time break. As it turns out, in the end, they went into the sheds 18-6 to the All Blacks. And, well, what can you say? Argentina, unlucky. Their defence caught out on the fringes a few times. They did defend a bit too narrowly, but they are very quick up. They are very punishing in defence. And they did look like they were playing at that level of the All Blacks for quite some time. But that killer hit just on the buzzer was really what destroyed them going into the rest of the match. So that was a halftime score. We go into the second half, and it was an absolute amazing start. Charles Piutau storms over for his try, and then Argentina went to sleep. This is what really disappointed me the most. The Argentinians just, they were gone. Just about 5 minutes after the break, it seemed like that was it. That's all they had to offer. That just absolutely gutted me to the depths. Then the All Blacks really got into their work. Sonny Bill Williams, he come from nowhere. He was offloading like an absolute machine. The ball was flying everywhere. The All Blacks were gone left, right and centre, offloads, running lines beautifully. They just clicked and Argentina went to sleep. I was like, oh no, this is not going to make for a good spectacle if Argentina cannot wake up. They were completely starved of any possession, and the All Blacks just dominated everything. It was looking bad for Argentina. It looked like it could be really going down the toilet for them. That is where I think they really missed a world-class 10. Sanchez is a good player, he's a solid player, and I'm not really too sure if they've got too much else to really put in there as a backup if Sanchez has a bit of a shocker. He was alright, but you got to think the likes of Fernandez and Hernandez, they're centres, inside centres, 10s, fullbacks, they play everywhere, but are they a better option to guide this Argentinian team around? I don't know, they just seem like they're missing someone at that point to just get the ball away, smash it upfield, and shut down the All Blacks, who are completely obliterating the game at that point. But I say that, and then Argentina comes awake around the 55th minute, 10 minutes on, and then they started to come back into the game. So a bit of a 10-minute nap just about cost them the game, but they come back, and they come back big too. Huge confidence started roaring into their match. What on earth happened to them? I'm not sure, but they've really started to go back to their core. The forwards were dominating the game. Creevy, oh, what an absolute stunning man he is. 2 tries. The first Puma to score 2 tries against the All Blacks from what I was reading during the match. Absolutely outstanding stuff from him, and that is exactly what I expected from Argentina. They dominated the ball, they got those mauls going from the line out, and they scored 2 very, very good tries as well. And you could see at that point, when Creevy went over for the second, the All Blacks were thinking, this isn't good. This is a huge weakness that we need to plug up, and there was some massive, massive conversations going on around that. Cody Taylor made his way onto the field, and congratulations to Cody Taylor becoming another All Black, and he had a good match to boot, didn't he? He did score a try. technically he could have scored 2 tries, but one was disallowed, went back and he scored it later on instead. So good debut from Cody Taylor. The young hooker is obviously someone the All Blacks have been watching for quite some time. He come into the game and then the game just powered on from there. It was a great finish. Both teams were looking quite good. Argentina were thinking and considering of storming back into the game, and it just got really aggressive. The hits were huge. The runs were massive. Sonny Bill was offloading everywhere. The game come alive, and I thought, well, this is it. This is what we've been waiting for. Why has it taken so long for this to get started? Argentina would have been so much better if they didn't fall asleep for that 10 or 15 minute gap just after halftime. It could have been quite a close match if you take out that little lapse before halftime with Nonu steaming over, and then Piatau just after the break. You take out those little 5-minute blunders where they just fall asleep, and that game could have been a lot more closer than it was in the end. I think Argentina will be a bit disappointed about the final scoreline. They played pretty well for about an hour of the match in the end, but the ABs, they really showed what they're capable of. They really showed that they are, one of the best teams going around, and by the end of the weekend, I think they clearly were the best side after this weekend's play. They looked the best. How does that transfer? That's not for me to say. We'll find out in coming weeks. But Carter was outstanding. He played very well. The All Blacks played quite well indeed, I have to say. Cody Taylor was good off the bench. Naholo was impressive, even though he's not a point. I think the centre pairing of Nonu and Sonny Bill Williams, they didn't go together like a glove, but they played quite nicely off each other. Nonu's in the form of his life, which helps no matter who your partner is. Sonny Bill learned to offload, which is only good for the All Blacks because that is where he is most dangerous. He had some absolute stunners, and the All Blacks were just too good in the end for Argentina. Final score was 39-18, and the All Blacks take 5 points from that, which will please them very much because that is the start exactly how they wanted. Argentina, a bit off the money, but they will be better for that. I think they learned a lot from that game, and if they can pull out an 80-minute performance, possibly next week against Australia, well, they're good enough, these Argentinians. We've seen it before, they're good enough. And going by our next match that we're going to have a look at, who knows what could happen, because this next game, let's turn our attentions to Australia versus South Africa. Now, this game, where do I start with this? This game had just about everything you could possibly want from a rugby game. It was boring as one thing for a start, then it burst into life later on, and then it had the thrilling finish and the controversy of was it a try or wasn't a try. In a nutshell, that is what happened for that match, the second game of the Rugby Championship. Let's go back to the start of the game where it all began, and first thing I noted about this game was they're still playing silly games with Quade Cooper in his defensive positions. Is this a tactic? I'm not too sure, but why are they hiding him around the park? Is it a time Quade Cooper manned up? Is it a master stroke? I know under the high ball he got found out a couple of times by hiding him back there in one of the winger spots, defending by the fullback. He can't do the high ball quite as well as his winger counterparts, so that is something that teams could target if they continue to hide him around the park. But that's not much of an issue. That's just something I thought they might have forgotten about and given up on, but the Wallabies know they're still going with that. Cheika obviously thinks that's a good enough plan. Israel Folau, now he is a man that I watch very much. I watch him for the whole game just to see what he does, because everyone toots on about how fantastic he is, but he's got a lot of downsides to his game. I can't think of a better word than that. But sure, he is a fantastic attacker, but he didn't really do that much in that game. He got one good run, about 30 metres or so, but he didn't actually beat anyone. He was unopposed, catching the ball. When he jumped, he went over the top of all the defenders, and he just ran for 30 metres before anyone picked him up. That's good, but Israel Dag can do that, and everyone knows how much I like Israel Dag. But there we go. Folau wasn't too fantastic. All his runs, he was quickly taken care of. He was great under the high ball. That was his strength. That always is his strength. But I think he needs to get more on his game. His kicking game really needs to develop if he wants to become that number one world-class fullback. He needs to develop something of more of an expansion to his game, more of an all-round game, because everyone knows he's going to run, and everyone knows you put 2 men on him. You know, like South Africa did in that game. They took care of him pretty well every single time. He didn't make too much of an impact into that game. An early try went bigging for the Springboks in about the 13th minute. Henry Pollard dropped an absolute plumb ball that should have been, what was it, a 3 or 4 on 1 overlap, catch and pass. They're in for the first try. It was an absolute devastating start for the South Africans. They could have really put the pressure on the Wallabies at that point very early on. The Australians will be happy that Stephen Moore lasted more than a couple of minutes. The last time he was captain for the Wallabies, of course, he went down in a screaming heap just a couple of minutes into the game. But how good is Schalkberger? Let's take a minute here to reflect on what he did. He played at number 8, not his favoured position, not his customary position. He was huge on defence. He was massive. I talked about in the preview having the 3 open side flankers at 6, 7, 8. How well did that work? My God, that was a masterstroke. I was just in awe watching that. Any ruck that had a glimmer of a chance that they could turn that over, and bang, there was 2 of them in there. And Hooper just could not handle that. As good of a player as Hooper is, he was on his own when it came to cleaning out a lot of those rucks, and he got completely outpowered by Berger and his buddies there as well. How good were they? They were fantastic. No one could touch them. And that was a huge part of how well South Africa did in that game. I thought, we'll get to the result later on about what I think about that, but Berger was great. He was amazing. Turnover balls, massive hits on the fence, huge hits on the fence. He was brutal, and he made a massive impact onto that game for South Africa, and that is a real option. To play those 3 open-siders with Berger at 8, that is massive. We got on to about the 20th minute, halfway through the first half, and Quade Cooper, he's really a confidence player, and it showed to me more than ever about then just how much he is a confidence player. He started to make a few mistakes, and you could see he was starting to get a bit flustered, he was starting to be a bit itchy, a bit doing silly things, and it really is a perfect opportunity for teams to attack him, drop his confidence, and really watch the Wallabies lose their way with him getting out of control with his confidence and how he affects the game. Luckily for him, there's a man outside him now called Matt Giteau, and I really wonder how long the Wallabies trained at getting the ball to Matt Giteau, because that's really, for the first 60 minutes, all the Wallabies really did. Get the ball to Giteau. He'll do something special. He's our wonder kid. We changed the rules of our national, well, not our national game, but the national rules of our game of rugby here to get this man back. So give him the ball. Give him the ball and just follow him. Hope he does something fantastic, and we'll go from there. It was a horrible game plan. Giteau was absolutely swamped with all the responsibility of that Australian team. Cooper did nothing at all. I don't think he had any impact at all. Giteau was hitting the line. He was offloading players through holes. Giteau was brilliant, and he is a world-class player, is Matt Giteau. So Cooper, I think, a bit of an X through his name from that game. He wasn't very good. Guinea looked a bit better, but then he's gone off injured and has to have surgery, so he's out for about a month, I think I read. So that's bad news for Guinea. He played all right. Not his best, but if he can get his way back in that Wallabies camp into form that we know he's capable of, I think he should be, or he's capable of being their top scrum half in the World Cup time. The set piece was a big thing for the Wallabies, and that's where they scored their opening try. Beautiful play, and a simple play, but manipulated perfectly to put Adam Ashley Cooper through a hole, and that was where they gained a lot of confidence from that. There was a lot of penalties in the first half, there was kicks going everywhere, and things were getting exciting through that stage. Etzebeth scored a stunner. It was try time aplenty after Adam Ashley Cooper went off, because Etzebeth replied swiftly and instantly. What an absolute beautiful kick. Advantage. Henry Pollard goes for the kick over the top, knocked down from Habana. The ball eventually found its way, I think, from Creel to Etzebeth, who bundled over in the corner. It was a magical try. It was a beautiful try. And comparatively to the set-piece try Australia scored, it's black and white, isn't it? A beautiful set piece, a fantastically well-worked move from Australia, and then just something off the cuff from the Springboks, which is something they need to adapt more into their game when they have such attacking flair. Handré Pollard, you cannot strap him down too much. He's too good of a player to really do that. In the dying minutes of this match, in the dying minutes of the first half, I should say, the game just exploded. Things were getting exciting. It was just the balls flying everywhere. There was big hits, there was line breaks. Everything sort of still happened. And then halftime went, and it was all like, wow, we just watched 37 minutes of a pretty average game with a couple of exceptional plays, scoring tries, and then bang, we've got line breaks, turnovers, big hits, everything happening, and then it just hit half-time and everything just went stop. 13-7, the Springboks lead the Wallabies at the break. What's the first half it was? So South Africa, they started off pretty averagely. The Wallabies, well, they were still going fairly averagely. I was watching two pretty poor teams at the start go head-to-head, and then the Springboks, I think, they drew into their game first. About half an hour mark, they started to really gel together, and they started to produce the goods, scoring that fantastic try, and that is what led them into the break. Leading at half-time, Australia didn't really have anyone to stand out from that first 40 minutes. They had a lot to improve on. They had a lot of work to do in the second half. They really needed to learn how to play together. So the second half got underway, and the Springboks had a slender lead going into their second 40 minutes, and they carried on exactly how they left off, which pleased me, because that game could have died a very slow and boring death, but the Springboks brought the passion, and straight into it they went, and they were looking very good straight off the whistle. Will Skelton, I have to mention him at this point, because I think he is someone who might cost the Wallabies some games in future. He is, lack of a better term, a bit of a loose cannon. He was pushing players off the ball, he was getting in tussles, he was doing, high shots around the neck of players that somehow didn't even get noticed. He just seems to be a bit of a player that might be able to get under the skin. I think if the Springboks do meet the Wallabies again later on, something like that, they may pick a hold on if he's still around. He's a big bloke. He's a strong bloke, and he just is pushing his weight around a bit too much. Nigel, of course, didn't really see too much about that. He's probably watching something else. Take that as you will. But I just think, off the ball, there's a lot of niggly stuff from Skelton, and it's something that could cost him and his team, possibly down the track, if he starts to get a bit frustrated with how things are going. Then we got on to the rest of the match, and the Springboks scored an absolute brilliant try through young Jesse Kriel. What an absolute beautiful movement it was through the backs. He beat an absolute pile of tackles. His step was outstanding. His change of speed and direction was fantastic. And for a man on debut, he had a brilliant game. Young Jesse Kriel, he is going to be a star for the future for the Springboks. Etzebeth, another one, along with Kriel, who had a huge game. Etzebeth was in everything. I think along with the back row, the Duplessis and Mtawawera, their whole forward pack, South Africa looked very good, and they were completely outplaying the Australian pack until the subs come on. The subs come on and things did start to fall apart in the match. Around the 48th minute, South Africa had a defensive scrum, and that is where they really put the pressure on here. They destroyed the Wallabies scrum, twisted it right around, bowled straight over the top of it defensively in their own 5-metre line. That was a telling moment right there that the Springboks pack is good enough internationally to push and bully everyone like we know they can in the past. We know that South Africa is a team that dominates up front. It was around the 55th minute, Australia, they started to learn how to play. They started to get into their movements, get into their grooves, and they started to explode into this match. That is what changed the game. South Africa were ahead, and they would just look like they were going to control the game through to the very end. I think Cooper, overall, he had a pretty poor match. He made quite a few mistakes. He was pretty invisible, and sure, the talks are now he's signing with the Australian Rugby Union to stay on, but I don't think he is their best number 10 with Guinea. Phibbs made a big difference when he come on. Ghetto controlled the game from 12, not Cooper at all, which doesn't bode well for him. Well, he could go to the World Cup still, but I don't think teams will really fear what he is capable of if he plays like he has been. So as we hit over the hour mark, Australia really started to create some opportunities, but their errors and their handling was letting them down. Ghetto put Folau into a massive hole, but he could not hold on to the pass. That was one of many chances that Australia put to the dirt. They were really opening the game up, and they looked like, for once, they were going to score through just general play, which they hadn't looked like doing through the whole match. But what really struck them down was South Africa's dominance at the breakdown. The 3 open side flankers, that is what ruled that match. And every breakdown, there was always that possibility, and it looked like it as well, that the Springboks would turn the ball over because of having those 3 open siders. Giteau was running the game. He was completely blitzing everyone, like his break there just about put Folau into space. That was just an example of what he had been creating for Australia. The problem was no one was really helping him out, and in the end he was the lone soldier. His friends outside him didn't really have the ability to keep up with them. Was that due to not knowing how he plays because he hasn't been with the Wallaby squad for a long time? Was he just completely outplaying everyone? I'm not sure what way that goes. But Giteau definitely is going to be a danger for the Wallabies, and with good reason. That's why they did the whole big thing about getting him to come back. Drew Mitchell, while we're on the topic of getting players to come back, how good does he look? Drew Mitchell was, if I remember correctly, when he was playing for the Wallabies before he went to France, quite a small fellow, quite fast, and he was an elusive runner, quick runner, and he was a finisher. How good does he look now? He looks like a real strong, he looks hard to tackle, he looks very determined, he looks like he's just, every time you see him on the camera, he just looks like he is going to go straight through the middle, bulldoze everyone, and score a match-winning try. He looks so good, he looks so fit, he looks like he is in the form of his life, and I am impressed by Drew Mitchell. I didn't really think much of him before he went to France, but now I'm impressed. He's come back, he looks ready, he looks good, and he should be starting for the Wallabies on the wing. I didn't rate him too much coming back from France, but I'm impressed by just the image he portrays in his character. That is really what he has got going for himself. He looks very good. So Australia started when they needed some points, and they had opportunities. Inside the South African 22, they looked to their Brumbies within them. They looked to the rolling maul. Of course, Pocock was coming onto the field, but how well did South Africa shut down that rolling maul? They absolutely dominated that part of the game, and the Wallabies didn't try that very much after that point. But this was the point where the changes started to come. Australia started to pick up because they were bringing on players who added to the game. They improved the Australian side of the game. South Africa, I think, made changes for the sake of making changes. They brought on a whole new front row, bang, one go. The whole lot got changed. That was very detrimental to how they were playing, because Mtawarira and Yanni and Bismarck were absolutely controlling that forward pack. Sure, they've got to come off sooner or later, but I think one go, one slap straight through the middle was probably a bit of a problem, and that kind of was a bit of their downfall. I think they can put that as a pretty big contributing factor to the end result of the game. But the problem that did come to the Springboks was their injuries. How many injuries did they get? Francois Lowe went off, Victor Matfield went off as well. That's 2 big ones in the forwards. Yanni du Plessis got a bit of a knock as well. How long are they going to be out? They're big players, especially in that forward pack as well. A lot of players going down. They've already got half of a hospital full of injured players. And it just makes you wonder, how full strength will this Springbok side be come World Cup time? Into the last few minutes of the game, the Australian forwards really started to come good. Now, and this is probably down to a few things, like the changes, the injuries, of course, new look in the front row, new players all throughout the team, and Australia their bench was probably had a bit more continuity than the Springboks did. But Burger, he was the mainstay, and he was just massive. Tumua Kamana, as I've said already, Fibs made a big difference. They started to get some go-forward ball. South Africa was starting to fade away, and Australia, they were starting to get the confidence. The crowd was right in with them, and then bang, 82 minutes into the game, and, well, let's put in some inverted speech marks. The try was scored from Kurandrani. Now, this is a huge talking point here, a massive talking point. They played well enough to get to the stage. They did not play well enough to win that game, I don't feel, which is disappointing that you can play good for 20 minutes and win a game of rugby, which counts towards the Springboks just didn't put that game away at any stage. The biggest lead was, I think, 20-7. That's not enough, or 20-8, something like that. That's not enough to win a game. That's not enough to put a team away, especially like Australia, that tried at the end, win or lose the game. They put all their coins into one basket. They didn't play enough throughout the whole match to win it. South Africa dominated every breakdown. They dominated 60 minutes of the match at least, and really the substitutes coming on, that's really what changed the game. Even the statistics say that Australia, given the chances they had, the opportunities, should not have really won that match. South Africa played a lot better with the less, and it really comes down to not putting the match away, not having that final dig to really put that final nail in the coffin. The final score was 24-20. The Wallabies got up remarkably, but we go back to that try. I'm interested to see what everyone else thinks. Was that a try? If you've seen it, if you haven't, have a look at it. There was a slight, it didn't even touch the ground point. They gave it a try in the end. But what I'm interested in is what you guys think, whether that was a try or not. I spoke to a few of you on Twitter last night. Huge banter on Twitter last night. Was fantastic from that match. But was it a try? Kurandrani, he was confident, and then he seen the replay. He wasn't confident. It's, what a contradiction. Who knows? Who knows? In the end, it was given as a try, but I want to see what everyone else thinks. I think it was a bit of a tough call. I don't think it really... It's too hard to call. I'm going on the side of no. When I watched it, I was like, no, you just can't give that. It's too inconclusive, and you just can't give that on such a massive thing. But then, like the comments have been saying around the globe, and of course from you guys on Twitter last night, you know, was Michael Cheika up there in the TMO's box watching the replay, giving some advice maybe to the TMO? You know, was he slipping him a couple of 20s under the table? A bit controversial, I know, but he has a history of that kind of thing at halftime, slipping into the referee's box. Goodness me. Controversy aplenty. It had to happen, didn't it? One of these games had to have it. Australia get the start they wanted. They get the 4 points, and they're off to a good start. Things now go to Argentina for the Wallabies. They're playing against the Pumas next weekend. I'll have a review for those games when the teams are announced, of course. But, I'm really looking forward to this. It might even be worth getting up in the middle of a night to watch, just to see the possibility that Argentina could knock the Wallabies off again. I think they're good enough. Australia did not show enough from that match. South Africa they were in trial period. They were just playing for the conditioning, playing for the experimental stage of things, and I think the game slipped away when they really looked that too much. Australia, credit to them, they pulled it into the end, they got the win, but that kind of match will not win them a World Cup in a few months' time. But that is a bit of a wrap-up here. The end result, Australia getting the win. The All Blacks get a big win as well, and they are off to South Africa next weekend to face the Springboks. That's going to be huge. I'm interested here mainly because the All Blacks were the best-looking side against them in Argentina. Springboks, I think, in my opinion, look better than the Wallabies for that match overall, and they're the two teams going head-to-head. Now, the two teams that didn't look the best. Argentina, they look good, but obviously they went down. Australia, they played 20 minutes of a game. I can't call that good. And they're going to be going at each other. Now, I'm interested to see how the Wallabies will go in Argentina. Can they play more than 20 minutes of rugby? And will the Argentinians play 80 minutes? They're good enough to knock them over. South Africa's good enough to beat the All Blacks. The All Blacks good enough to win in South Africa. It's all going on. The Wallabies, if they play a good 60 minutes, they're good enough to beat Argentina as well. What is going to happen? Fitness, experiments, squad changes happening all over the place. So when the teams are announced, I'll be back again for a preview of next weekend's. But for now, that is a bit of a review. As always, going on far too long. My notepad is not big enough, and that is my time. Done and dusted for today. Give me your ideas on what you think would be a cool series name for this as well, and let me know. What do you think about those two matches? What do you think about what I've said? It is just my opinion, so don't go tearing me up. It's always good to have some good chat and banter on the channel in the comments as well, which I definitely do recommend everyone gets involved. But for now, that is me. Thanks for tuning in and watching. I'll see you next time for some more rugby action. Until then, take care.